3 a.m. There I was, laying in bed. Not sleeping, of course. Insomnia's a bitch, and there ain't much you can do about it. I've suffered from it, on and off, for my entire adult life. My teenage years as well, now that I think about it. One thing I've learned: laying there with your eyes closed in bed, it's not as restful as actual sleep, and it can be pretty boring, but it'll help a little with the exhaustion the next day. But trouble sleeping was the least of my concerns that night. I got a phone call, which was more than a bit odd. Some of my friends are still out at this hour, but I don't usually get calls this late, or this early. Take your pick. The number was unfamiliar, so I refused the call. Probably a misdial, I thought. A few moments later, it rang again. Same number. I shook my head. Probably one of those so-called friends. Maybe they lost their phone, had to borrow another. I had no clue, but resigned, I picked up. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar. It was a woman's voice, and a particularly gentle one. With a distinct ring of urgency, she spoke. Please, whatever you do, don't hang up. You don't know me, but I promise you, I only want to help. I was confused, but as I opened my mouth, I heard a gentle knock at my bedroom door. Fear immediately took hold. Somebody was in my apartment. I started to reach for the revolver in my bedside table, but the woman spoke again. Don't answer the door. It can't get in if it's locked. Ignoring her, I grabbed my gun. As I stood up, she spoke again, louder, more urgently. Don't unlock your door. Please, I promise you, everything will be fine, but you absolutely mustn't let it in. The knock repeated, a bit louder this time, and I found myself hesitating. The woman on the phone breathed a sigh of relief, and my anxiety started to grow. I hadn't said anything yet, so why was she relieved? I know it doesn't make any sense, and I know you don't have any reason to listen to me, but no matter what, I promise you that you will be okay if you just listen to my instructions. I finally responded to her and asked, "Who are you? What's going on?" Not the most creative line of questioning, but she answered, "I'm a friend, and you would never believe me, I'm sorry to say. Nobody ever does, but sometimes they listen, and when they do, they make it to the end. They survive. So please, please don't hang up, and whatever you do, don't unlock your door." As she spoke, she seemed on the verge of tears. Again, I opened my mouth to reply. This time, the knock on the door was booming. The sound of a fist slamming against the thin, hollow wood. I stepped back and lifted my gun, aiming for the door. I was sweating heavily, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt thick, and I wanted nothing more than to pull the trigger. And then, all at once, it stopped. I wasn't afraid, or even anxious. The woman on the phone, a bit less tense, said, "It's gone for now. It will come back, and when it does, you must not open the door." I started to ask another question, but she interrupted me. "You left your front door unlocked. Go and lock it now, please." I stepped warily towards my bedroom door and hesitated for a moment before unlocking it. My apartment seemed untouched. I knew I could not have imagined the slamming on my door, but not a single thing was out of place. My initial hypothesis, that it was some sort of psychotic burglar, started to feel less plausible. "The front door," the woman reminded me. I put my gun down on the coffee table in the middle of the living room, still holding the phone in my left hand, and moved towards the door. As I reached for it, I suddenly heard footsteps, fast, loud, rushing, and getting closer. The woman, for the first time, shouted, "Lock it! Hurry! Even one will do." I heard a hand grab the handle on the other side of the door, just as I slid the bolt in place. Outside, something snarled and knocked gently on my front door. I turned the lock and the handle as well, and took a step back. "You did it. You're fine. It can't get in now. Please, don't leave your apartment until morning." The woman hung up almost immediately after, and I was left, alone, to think about what I'd heard. I returned to my room collecting my revolver. I decided to leave it on my nightstand, rather than to put it back in the drawer, and incredibly, I fell asleep soon after. When I woke up, it was 11 a.m., my day off, fortunately, and I started to wonder if the events of the previous night were just a dream. But my revolver still sat on the bedside table. I went to make myself a cup of coffee and nearly jumped a foot in the air when I heard a rapping on my front door. "Open up, police business," a gruff voice called, and I relaxed a little bit. I went over and, swallowing nervously, unlocked and opened my front door. 2 officers were standing in the doorway, and at least 6 more were out in the hall, questioning other neighbors. "What's going on here? Did something happen?" I asked. And the gruff officer replied, "Last night, there was a murder on your floor. We want to ask you a few questions." The questions were pretty standard, and I didn't want to make a suspect of myself, so I obliges. After the police left, I immediately locked my door again. I was, to say the least, terrified. I still am. I don't know what that was last night, but I know that if I hadn't listened to the woman on the phone, I would most likely be dead right now. It's nearly midnight. My front door is locked and bolted. Tomorrow, I might go out and buy a big-ass padlock just to be sure, because as I'm typing this, somebody is knocking on my front door, and I don't want to take any chances. Anybody know what's going on? What time is it? I don't know. I did know. It was 11:55 p.m. I lose motivation to talk properly when I'm tired, although this was definitely an overreaction. At most, it would have taken an extra second to tell him the time, but I wasn't really thinking. I just wanted to get home, ignoring all social interactions. I didn't even look up to see this man's face. He left without saying anything, limping as he walked, leaving me alone at the bus stop, waiting for the final departure of the night. A single minute past midnight was the usual time on the schedule, although it's almost always late, despite only ever having a few passengers at most. My late shift at work had me used to these empty hours of the night. This specific part of town lacked in nightlife entertainment, leaving little reason to be out after dark. The shops were long closed, waiting for the bustling environment of the next morning. Until then, they remained silent. Some had their lights on all night long, spilling echoes of life into an otherwise inactive street. If the rapture occurred with me at this bus stop, it would take a long while for that news to reach me, as I simply continue waiting for an ever later, never arriving bus. These are the kind of thoughts I have as I wait in the dark for the bus. The occasional breaks in these thoughts are often caused by me checking the digital sign above me, displaying an estimated time for all upcoming departures, expecting to see 5 minutes, or perhaps a more delayed 10 minutes. I hadn't planned on having to read a whole sentence. So, as I finished checking the sign, only then did my mind realize that it had not even seen a number. I had checked the sign but did not comprehend the content. My double take showed me what I had missed. The next bus is not real. Do not board. I stared for a moment before looking around. What I expected to see, I do not know. Perhaps some pranksters giggling at their work, or more sinisterly, a shadowy figure looming over to guide this paranormal event. Nothing. I saw nothing. The same street I had become familiar with had nothing new. It remained empty, with me as its only sign of life. So, I waited. It was 11:59 p.m. by this point, so only 2 more minutes remained. On time for what may have been the first time ever, the bus arrived. A single minute past midnight, and here it was, pulling around the corner, approaching the stop. I put my hand out to signal my need to board, feeling relieved that my only way home hadn't been canceled. As the bus approached, I noticed the dark interior. The headlights were on, but the lights inside were all off. I could not make out whether any passengers were on board, or even who the driver was. Being a regular, I know most of the final route drivers. But this time, it was anybody's guess. I got onto the bus, putting down the same change I always do. Bit dark, isn't it? Nobody replied, as the doors closed behind me, and the bus continued its way forward. I smiled awkwardly, despite knowing that the driver could not see me, and found a seat. I never found out whether there were any more passengers, but I can only hope that nobody else had to go through these next events. Almost immediately, I noticed stops being omitted from the route. A turn missed here, a completely wrong turn taken there. A panic set in that I had somehow gotten onto the wrong bus, despite knowing for a fact that the bus I always get is the only local one that runs this late. Convincing myself that an unfortunate series of road closures had occurred, I remained calm and waited it out. After 10 minutes of this, we had circled back to the stop I had boarded at. In front of us, I noticed a more normal bus, the bus I was supposed to board. The lights were on, with a few passengers. It was waiting at the stop. I spoke slightly louder than the rumble of the engine. "Excuse me, can I get off? I'm on the wrong bus." No answer, as we slowly passed the correct bus. I could see the passengers inside all staring ahead. My gaze followed theirs, meeting at an ambulance, parked just slightly in front. A small group of paramedics knelt down in the beam of the bus headlights, surrounding a body on the floor. I couldn't make out the body's face, as it was just out of sight, although one leg looked twisted. The passengers looked distraught, whilst the bus driver stood talking to the paramedics. I stood up. "I need to leave at the next stop." As I spoke, I pressed the bell, and the only sign of any internal lights lit up at the front of the bus, stopping. The sign then immediately turned off. Subsequent bell presses neither made the sound, nor lit up the sign. "I need to..." The bus sped up suddenly, the force pushing me back into my seat. As I tried to stand up again, the wheels screeched as we turned a sharp corner without seeming to slow down at all. Again, the force pushed me back down. The speed continued to rise. The wheels on the bus went faster and faster until the outside world became simply a blur. I had never seen a car go this fast, let alone a road vehicle as large as this. I thought for sure that I was going to die, right there. "What are you doing?" I found myself yelling out amid the panic. The driver, for the first and last time, spoke. "I don't know." My mind raced almost as fast as my body was being thrown about. The world beyond the windows soon morphed into a void of black, although the effects of our speed were still evident on my body, as the velocity pushed me in all directions. It felt as though we had somehow gotten even faster, although this may have been the darkness forbidding my eyes of any reference for our true speed. We came to a sudden stop as I fell forward. The fall was violent, but still not as bad as you'd expect for a speed change of that magnitude. My nose hit the floor, causing a great deal of pain. I stood up, holding my face, trying to regain my balance. As the dizziness subsided, I began to notice where I was. We were outside my home. The bus stop I get off at is a 5-minute walk from here. Yet here we were, directly outside my house. The doors gently opened. Despite my desire to leave as fast as possible, I found myself walking to the front of the bus. As I reached the door, I stopped, turning around slowly to face the still shrouded in darkness bus driver. I spoke what I always do. "Thank you." I stepped onto the pavement outside as the doors closed behind me, followed by the bus driving forward into the darkness. I looked down at my watch. A minute past midnight. It's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's perspective on it as well. She just doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I lived in a mid-sized city in the southern United States, where the main thing to do at the time was go to the mall. Sure, we had movie theaters and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that, there really wasn't much to the city. My mom worked at a department store located in the mall, and having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out of the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in the food court. Honestly though, I was shy and preferred to just stay cooped up in the break room playing video games on my Nintendo 3DS. My mom's co-workers were generally very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or just to check on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mom on weekends, I could usually convince my mom to pick up my friend. We were actually dating, but since we were both girls, I didn't want that to get out, to go along with us. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak a secret date in every now and then. My girlfriend, though, never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did, so I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her to just walk over to a nearby store and look around, or to go grab something from the food court rather than walking. But I noticed pretty quickly that she wasn't trying to actually get me to walk around. She just didn't want to be in the break room. Now, my girlfriend was more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambience of the break room for some reason. For a little while, I let it go, but eventually, I got frustrated and asked directly what was really bothering her about the break room. I thought she was going to tell me that it was too cramped, or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy, the things that bothered me about it too. But no, what she told me was that she heard things in the ceiling, like someone was walking around in there. I had learned from my mother that there was a room in the ceiling, but it wasn't for walking around. It was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation, but technically, someone could go up there. So I told my girlfriend this and said it was likely an employee up there to fix stuff. She said that was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication, and though I got frustrated, I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling. Though my mom just looked distressed and said they hadn't been up there fixing anything that day, but she wanted me to see something. My mom took me into the receiving room of the department store, which was just a room off in the back filled with boxes and random junk the store was going to put out for sale. The layout of this room, though, was sort of an L shape. One part of the L was used for receiving, but the other part was the way into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb in there, as it would have been a safety hazard. The only thing that this particular area had was a hatch that led into the ceiling. That was it. So needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be claw marks leading up the wall to the hatch. I still remember the way they looked. Brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mom if it was a prank, but she told me that this wasn't the first time it had happened, and she had no way of knowing I would even ask about it. According to her, these weird carvings had shown up several times over the course of a few months. Each time, the store would call in the mall security and maintenance teams, who would clean the wall up and then go into the ceiling to investigate. Nothing had ever come of their searches, though, and they eventually gave up dealing with the marks. The only explanation mall security could give was that it was likely a homeless individual who had made their way into the ceiling by sheer willpower and happened to be very good at hiding during the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mom after that, and any time I wanted my girlfriend to come over, we found somewhere else to go during the day. Sometimes she'd just come over to my house and we'd watch TV or whatever, but I didn't feel safe going back to the break room after that. I knew nothing had happened up until that point, but I just didn't want to risk it, honestly. So, to whoever or whatever was walking around in the ceiling at my mom's workplace, let's not meet. Something strange happened to my brother, Alex. He is normally a very stoic man, rarely showing any emotions aside from when he laughs. The most he can give me is a half-assed side smile or a faint chuckle. The only way to get any confirmation from him is by directly asking him how he is, which he is at least very honest about. He isn't depressed. As far as I know, we just suspected that he just isn't that good at expressing emotions. But one morning, things were different. Me and Mother were downstairs in the kitchen eating breakfast. Normally Alex is the first to wake up, but not today. We guessed he stayed up late reading or something. Eventually he came downstairs and my mother greeted him. However, she stopped her words halfway through. I turned around to see what caught my mother's tongue and saw something I never thought I'd see. Alex was standing there, smiling. No half-assed side grin this time. It was a full ear-to-ear smile with teeth. It was a normal smile, but seeing it on Alex's face, it felt much more significant than it probably was. It shocked me, and it shocked my mother just as much, like it was the first time we ever saw Alex smile. It took a few seconds of minor disbelief for my mother to finally ask him what he's smiling about. I'm just happy," he told us with the same smile on his face. Part of me wanted to be glad that Alex was showing a face other than the blank one he normally gives us. It was a good look on him after all, but something about it was off-putting. Alex may have appeared happy, but he didn't make eye contact with any of us. He just stared right between us, like each of his eyes were individually tracking us. His tone of voice wasn't any different from his normal tone. Upon closer inspection, it certainly didn't match his face, almost like he was pretending to be happy. Lastly, he insisted on skipping breakfast, despite my mother preparing him waffles. He told her he wasn't hungry before grabbing his bag, his keys, and walking right out the door while wishing us well. He probably met a really cute girl yesterday, my mother suggested. I stayed home from school that day because I wasn't feeling well. During the day, a few of Alex's friends texted me in regards to his sudden mood change. I already knew what they were talking about, and I told each of them that he had just woke up in a good mood today. They all seemed pleased with seeing him happy, while one of his closest friends joked about him, saying how his face looked like a puppet. I was resting on the couch watching cartoons when Alex arrived home from school. To my surprise, that same smile he woke up with was still there. I even saw the glint of his pearly teeth from where I was lying down. Mother greeted Alex as he walked in and, like this morning, was shocked to see he was still smiling. She finally decided to break the ice and ask him about what's got him in such a good mood. "I'm just happy, that's all," he said with a steady tone. Mother pushed a little further and began asking questions. "Did you meet a cute girl? Bump into an old friend? Passed an exam with flying colors? Anything at all?" "Nope, I'm just really happy." She excused him finally, and he made his way upstairs to get ready for work. Me and Mom exchanged looks when he was no longer in sight. There was a cause for concern, but neither of us could put a finger on it. I spent the rest of my sick day upstairs in my room. I was able to hear my brother come back from work, followed by what I could only interpret as an argument between him and Mom. It wasn't loud, but there was some obvious emotionally charged back and forth between them. Later, I heard Alex walk upstairs and enter his own room, followed by Mom yelling, "I don't want to see you for the rest of the night." When I came downstairs to see Mother and ask what happened, she spoke as her head rested in her hand. He was sent home early from work. His manager told him that he was making customers uncomfortable with his creepy behavior and smiling. Days went by, and the same pattern repeated itself. He was still smiling every time I saw him. and when I wasn't looking, I could assume he smiled still. I would say that I was getting used to the smile, but, in all honesty, there was something that was making it hard to accept it. I couldn't even get an answer out of him since all he would say was that he was just happy. It changed one day. I got back from school after I started feeling better and saw that Alex wasn't downstairs. Instead, I saw Mom and Dad sitting in the kitchen. From body language alone, it seemed like they were urgently waiting for me to come back. Before I could ask where Alex was, Dad held my hand and talked to me. "Son, go to your room." It took me by surprise. Why? Did I do something wrong? No, but please go to your room and wait for us. I could tell from his tone of voice alone that it seemed urgent, so I obliged and walked upstairs to my room. It was dead silent there, so silent that I could faintly make out what my mom and dad were saying from the floor below me. He attacked me. Is he sick? They just tore. I couldn't get anything else but simple words, but longer words and sentences weren't intelligible. I tried to listen closer to them, but I ended up picking up another person's voice instead. "Hey," I heard it from outside my room. "Hey." It sounded familiar. "Come over here." I picked up the tone and voice of Alex from where his room was. It was muffled as it passed through several walls as it came from his room to mine. "Let me show you something." I stepped out of my room to investigate, praying that if I could see Alex, that he was okay. I tiptoed out so that my parents didn't hear me and made it to Alex's door. I peeked through the door to find out. "Brother, I'm happy. I'm so happy, brother." Alex stood in the very center of the room, eyes staring directly at me. His smile was ever present, way beyond just grinning from ear to ear. The corners of his mouth were torn and broken, pushed apart by the new rows of 1,000 teeth. It reached from one side of the room to the opposite, looking more uneven. The further from his head, it extended. His lips stretched beyond what they should be able to, chipping and breaking like old paint on rotting wood. There was no way to tell how he kept his smile from falling, aside from some apparent struggles. I could sense a growing pain from him through the crack of the door, a silent cry for help being masked by an impossible emotion. It was at that moment when I passed out, probably from shock, but I couldn't remember. I woke up on the floor right in front of Alex's room. The door was wide open, the window in his room opened, and Alex was no longer inside. I heard the stomping of my dad rushing upstairs with my mom following him. Mom helped me stand while Dad searched inside Alex's room, then my room, then the bathroom, then their own bedroom. It was clear that wherever Alex was, he wasn't in our home anymore. As of writing this, it's been several weeks since Alex went missing. We tried to go to the police, but the trail ended up cold. Mom and Dad are still clearly shaken up from what happened and have been extra attentive to me and my health as a result. I can't lie when I say I was pretty shaken too, but I'm not so scared of what happened to Alex. It scares me more to think about where he is now and what he's doing with that sick, twisted smile of his. Samantha told me about it on our third date. We were watching a movie on her couch when I made my move to kiss her. She whipped her hand in front of my face and blocked me. "There's something you need to know," she said. I braced myself. Here it comes. I'm not ready for a relationship. Nothing to do with you, of course. It was the absolute last thing that I wanted to hear, because I was already crazy about her. "Okay," I said. "I have a removable face. That's a new one." "You have a what now?" I was about to laugh, but she was wearing a deadly serious expression. "I have a removable face. Is that like a metaphor or something?" "No. My face is literally removable. Look closely." She lifted her chin and traced her jawline with a finger. "You can see the seam." After admiring how beautiful her neck was for a dizzying moment, I leaned in for an inspection. It was very hard to see, but it did look like there was a slightly unnatural transition there from her face to her throat. I grew dizzier as a dozen questions rushed into my brain. "Don't bother asking why or how or anything like that," said Samantha. "I can't tell you that. If that's going to be a problem, you should leave now. I'm letting you know this because I like you, and I want to take the next step, but this is non-negotiable." "Okay," I said, unsure of what was happening. "Not a problem. So what? You have a removable face. Who cares? It looks good. There's something else. Once a day, usually in the evening, I have to remove the face and disinfect the inside of it. If I don't, it will rot. This takes about an hour, give or take, depending on how my day went. During this time, you must never ever look at my real face. Never. Do you understand?" "Why, yes, got it. Don't ask about it. Don't look at your real face." Samantha stood up. "Now, I'm going to go into the bathroom and clean my face. That will give you plenty of time to think about what I've told you. If you're here when I'm done, that's great. I would like that. But if you're gone, I'll understand." She turned and walked into her bedroom. I sat in stunned silence as I heard the bathroom door close. I gave the thing some serious thought. It was possible that it was a joke of some kind. It was possible that it was a delusion. Was it possible that it was true? Well, it was certainly possible to transform an actor's face with movie makeup. So I supposed it was possible that Samantha wore a removable face every day. Maybe she had had a horrible accident where her flesh had been mangled. Maybe her face had been melted by acid, or burned by fire, or the skin shorn off by heavy machinery. If it had, I would never know, because she would never tell me, and I would never see it. I pictured a face of raw, naked muscle, rotting away. Could I kiss her if that was what I was kissing? But wasn't that what we all were, under the skin? Just muscle and bone and blood and squishy organs. I paced around the living room, running my hand through my hair. I liked Samantha a lot. She was smart and funny and beautiful. But was that beauty real? Did it count? Did it matter if it was real or not? Was I being superficial, even worrying about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I was still there. I looked at her face. She smiled, and I was in love. We dated. We moved in together. We decided to get married. For the most part, it was a completely normal relationship, typical of two young people in love, building a life together. During the day, it was easy to forget about the face altogether. It looked natural enough, and only in certain positions, in certain lights, was there ever any indication that it wasn't natural. But every night was the same. Samantha would close herself in the bathroom, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2, and clean the inside of her face. The curiosity never left me. I would sit there and wonder what was under that face. I came so close to barging in on her a few times, but I never did. I did occasionally ask her about it, about what, if anything, had happened, about how it was possible to make the removable face look so real, about what it really looked like underneath. I tried to coax her into showing me, assuring her that I loved her no matter what, and didn't give a damn what her real face looked like. I was just curious, that's all. She never showed me or told me the story behind it. She didn't get upset at me, unless I was really badgering her. She'd just shrug and say, "You know you can't see it. You know I can't tell you about it." I never told anybody about Samantha's removable face. It's not that she asked me not to. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. Except once, I did tell somebody. It was during my bachelor's party. We had rented several cabins in Big Sur and spent the night drinking and packing our noses with powders that we shouldn't have been packing our noses with. Everyone else had passed out, and the sun was creeping up behind us as I stood on the majestic cliffs with my friend Chris, looking down on the Pacific waves crashing against the rocks. Chris was my best friend, as close to a brother as I'd known. We'd grown up together and visited each other at college often and spent the summers together. After college, we'd moved to different cities, but we stayed in close contact. Standing there on the cliffs, I told Chris about Samantha's removable face. At first, he thought I was joking. Then he had 1,000 questions, most of which I couldn't answer. What's underneath? I don't know, man. I don't know. Doesn't that drive you crazy, not knowing? I shrugged. Lots of stuff I don't know. Don't know how to do calculus, and I don't know what happens when we die. But dude, she's about to be your wife, and you don't even know what she looks like. I mean, I'd have to take a look, like, you could set a camera up in the bathroom. That's where she does it, right? Set up a camera and have a look, and then you'll know. I sighed. Yeah, it drives me crazy. I've asked her 1,000,000 times, but she told me I could never look. Gotta respect that, man, even if I don't like it. That's love. Chris laughed. You telling me to respect a woman? Up is down now. Then we fell back into talking about old times as a new day dawned. Chris was in town for business last week and planned on spending the weekend at our house. The conversation at Big Sur had happened 4 years ago, and we hadn't spoken about Samantha's removable face since. Despite keeping in close contact and seeing each other as often as two people transforming into adults in different parts of the country can. It happened on Saturday evening. We were lounging lazily in the backyard, deep into the beer, having just finished with some grilled steaks when I got a text from work. God damn it, I groaned. I have to make a work call. Seriously? Said Samantha, raising an artificial eyebrow. On a Saturday night? My biggest client, baby. Sorry. It is what it is, I guess, said my wife. I'm going to head inside and get cleaned up. Chris, are you okay just hanging out for a bit? Chris smiled. I'll be fine. Got my beer, got some weeds to pull in your garden. God knows your lazy-ass husband isn't going to do it. Those tomatoes are choking to death. It's a tragedy. I rolled my eyes and went into the side yard to make my call. 15 minutes into it, I heard the screams coming from inside. Both my best friend and my wife were wailing in terror. I dropped the phone and ran into the house and down the hall to our bedroom. Through the open door, I could see that the door to the master bathroom was also standing open. Don't come in, screamed Samantha. I don't have my face on. Call an ambulance. He looked. Oh God, he looked. She sounded desperate and truly horrified. That made me desperate and horrified, and I wanted to rush into the bathroom, but I knew suddenly that that would be a mistake. I knew suddenly that Samantha didn't want me to look at her real face, not out of a sense of vanity, but for my own safety. Chris staggered backwards, out of the bathroom. He was holding a straightened-out paperclip, which he had used to pick the privacy lock. Now he was stabbing it again and again into his eyes, shouting gibberish. He was clearly in the depths of madness, and it turned my stomach to see him mutilate himself. Call a fucking ambulance, my wife screamed. Don't come in here. He fucking looked. I turned and ran back to the side yard, where my phone was lying in the newly mowed grass. My client was still on the line, alarmed, asking what was happening, what all the screaming was. I hung up on him and called 911. When the paramedics arrived, Chris was having a seizure in the hallway. Samantha was stroking his head, sobbing. Her face was on, but it had been done hastily and everything looked a little off. My world has been dark this past week. My best friend is in a psychiatric hospital under suicide watch. He's completely blind and mostly catatonic, except when he slips into a violent, babbling mania. The doctors are optimistic that his state is temporary, but they don't know the truth about what caused it, because I told the paramedics that Chris had taken a large dose of psychedelic mushrooms and fallen into psychosis. I saw no good reason to tell the truth about what had happened. Who would believe that one look at my wife's real face would make somebody insane? At best, we would be the subjects of a long investigation. At worst, we would have to prove that what we were saying was true by showing somebody Samantha's face. Then the same thing would happen again, and what after that? I had no idea, and no interest in finding out. For Samantha's part, I knew that she would never consent to show anybody her real face, no matter what the consequences of refusal were. I did get a follow-up call from the police, asking me to confirm my story. The hospital found no traces of psilocybin in Chris's blood, though that's not unheard of, since it has a short half-life. If they end up testing his hair, I will likely be in a lot of trouble, but that's truly the least of my concerns. Samantha is in a state of her own. She still cleans the inside of her face, though not as regularly, and when she puts it back on, it's always crooked now. It is beginning to smell a little bit. I've tried to assure her that it wasn't her fault. He knew, I said. I told him that nobody was ever allowed to look at it. He knew, and then he broke into the bathroom. This is not on you, baby. Please, talk to me. Not on me. That one look at my fucking face makes people insane. Please, I just need some time alone. As for me, I am doing my best to hold it together. Do you know what's strange, though? Despite what happened to Chris, I still find myself curious about what my wife's real face looks like. More curious than ever, really.